Rugby Championship. It was the day of the Golden Boys, Sasha Feinberg Mngomezulu and the Springboks, who put on another huge show at Kings Park. We again here with Nick Mallett and Gavin Rich, both here with us. Lots to say about this, guys. What a test, what a performance by Sasha. And Gavin and I spoke last night, Nick, and we said probably can't remember seeing such a complete performance by a 10 in the last sort of 3-4 decades, probably in the Springbok jersey.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think, the hype is just going to get higher and higher for this guy. He has unbelievable self-confidence. He has incredible physical attributes, his speed, his hand-eye coordination, his eye for a gap. He's got a real understanding of space. And it was his first real game that he has completely imposed himself on the opposition. I mean, there was that just on that first half, we made some first probably 20 minutes. We weren't in the game. They had a lot of the ball. We were playing in our own half. There was no fluidity. We weren't able to create anything because we couldn't get out of our half, and we were sticking to the game plan of putting the ball up in the air. But the moment we got a bit of fast front foot ball, he was absolutely electric, and I think more importantly was, despite some real mistakes. I mean, poor old Cheslin, it was just in that moment he just didn't ever think that anyone would consider that he wasn't kicking the ball to his mate, but unfortunately a drop kick from that position which goes over the line was not a good idea. And immediately after that, it was Sasha, put the long kick in and chased it and scored himself, and then we had Damien Willemse. There was a penalty advantage, and Damien carried the ball out 5 yards from our line, thinking they'd go back to the penalty advantage. And of course, they would prefer to take a penalty, the line out right next to the line, and from that we got a yellow card, and they scored a penalty try. So, and immediately after that, what does Sasha do? But we hold on to the ball through 10 or 15 phases into extra time in the first half, and he managed to wriggle over with himself. So it was almost like he was taking the responsibility of that team in his own hands, and then we came out in that second half and just destroyed them. It was really outstanding rugby. 9 tries. I mean, I apologize to the viewers. I under predicted all the time with these guys, but with a guy like Sasha and a guy like Mani, you just don't know how it's going to go. They create so many opportunities that if we take those opportunities, we're going to get lots of points on the board. And I think, Gav, you were better at sensing that than I was. It's easier to predict a game with Pollard there because it's going to be tighter. You'll kick the goals, but we're not going to create as many opportunities. Sorry, I spoke a bit too long there, but I was very excited by that performance.
No problem. Look, Brendan, I mean, we spoke last night. Just looking at what Nick said, with the expectation of the team. And I don't know how I've said this ad nauseum now over the last 6 weeks. I haven't forgotten the first 20 minutes against Australia in Johannesburg, and then there was the second 40 minutes in Wellington, and now the last 50 minutes or maybe 45 minutes of this particular game, where they really have sort of like established their standard, I think, the BOKS. So we talk about Sasha. I mean, he's one of those really special players. I can't remember who the sports writer was. But back in the days when people read sports writing because there wasn't TV, when Graham Pollock first arrived on the scene, a well-known South African sports writer wrote that every now and then a jewel comes along, and it's a jewel that's and he was talking about Graham Pollock. Just a little bit later than that, he could have been talking about Barry Richards. I look at somebody like Sasha like that. I think if Bob Skinstad hadn't got injured in that horrible car accident in 1999, Bob Skinstad would have been a very special player too. But he just, to me, is one of those special freaky talents. I don't deal as much in the modern day as I do in the past. Like other people would say, well, what about A.B. de Villiers? Yes, very special player too. So he's that kind of guy. He just is a really good player. But to me, the most impressive thing about the BOKS, once they do get that momentum, is the skill set of the forwards now. I mean, Tony Brown works a lot with the forwards, as we know, because we did an interview with him a couple of weeks ago, and he said that, and he pointed out to us that you don't you don't just work with the backs when you're an attack coach. But he's done an amazing job there. I mean, the skill set of the forwards, the guys, somebody like Wilco Low running through onto the ball, and big guys like that putting out offloads and things. It's just amazing. And that to me is the biggest improvement of the box, is that in the past we used to sit and we used to sort of think, well, the Kiwis just have more mobile pack and they've got a better skill set. But now we've got players, huge men, who can do that and handle, who can fit in at the back line. It's really quite incredible. To me, that's the most important sort of step forward for the Boxers is the all-round skill set. I mean, I know we've had mistakes in halves in the last couple of weeks, but when they put it together, it's almost like they can't drop the ball, and that is really what's fantastic to see.
Yeah, Brendan, can I, if I don't mind, just to quickly finish off, we actually, right at the beginning of this podcast, right at the beginning of the season, in fact, before, we were saying that the Boks really need to present a difficult attack picture to the opponents. They've got to still keep the power game. We've got to still have our big forward carriers. And a guy like Visser was outstanding at that. So was Peter Steph Toy. I mean, as you said, Wilco Low, just they really ran good, hard lines, but they still had the ability to play that soft pass out the back. And that is so much more difficult for the opposition to understand who we can tackle. Okay, no, so I was just saying the opposition are faced with a line of attackers running at them, and they can't, in the past it was very easy for them to decide. It was the first receiver with two cleaners, and then another first receiver with two cleaners off 9. But now, that first receiver can play a little tip pass to the second guy. He can pass out the back to a backline player, who then can miss another forward on a short run and pass out the back to a backline player again. And we leave our two big guys in the wide channels like Pete Steff and Sia Khaleesi. I mean, it really is difficult. And a side like Argentina, who have improved immensely this season. I mean, they really have beaten Australia, beaten New Zealand. For them to take, a hammering in the second half like that, I mean, that really proves that we have got an attack that is, equal, if not better, than Australia and New Zealand. And that was not the case in the past. So congratulations to our coaches and to Rusty and to Tony Brown, but to all of them for their improvement in what they present to the opposition when we have the ball.
Yeah, I was going to say, Gav made the point last night that this team has played in 80 minutes yet. They played two very good halves in the last two matches, and those two very good halves made 107 points in them. And these aren't teams that you could say are number 10 or 12 in the world that we're playing. It must be very scary. That's the first part of the question. It must be very scary for any opposition coach. And I want you to put yourself in the opposition coach's sort of situation. How do you prepare for this team? And second, just on Sasha, maybe just to take that point a bit further as well. After a performance like this, I know we've spoken in the past about the three flaws and the different horses for courses. And you've got Andre, the banker, and you've got Marnie, who's the magician, and all these things. But how do you keep Sasha out the side after this, after a performance like that? So I'll I'll start with Sasha. Sasha, I think Rusty is going to stick to what he said all along. He wants 3 players in each position. We saw what Marnie did when he came along. He scored a most miraculous try himself. Don't mustn't forget that. But it was the reading of the game that was so good from Sasha. Absolutely outstanding. He took the decisions at the right time. His cross kick to Colby. I don't think Colby even had to hesitate 1/2 a second in his run up the touchline. He took that ball at full pace. I mean, it was just impossible to defend against that. Early on in the game, he put a little grubber through and then he kicked it again. And if Moody hadn't kicked it a bit too hard, I think, or one of them, we would have scored another try. He just sees space so well. So it is going to be difficult, but I know that there's no one guaranteed of a test match place with Rusty. It just doesn't work like that. He wants to keep on continuing, improving all the players. So Sasha, that was an outstanding. For me, the most encouraging thing was he finished the game. To get through a game, that guy also has been fragile in the past, and he's promised so much, but never actually been able to commit to finish a game because he's physically very committed on, both on defense and on attack. And your first question again, sorry, you were talking about. I was going to say,
it must be horrible for the opposition.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think what people have to do is they have to look at how Argentina handled that first 20 minutes. And in the first 20 minutes, they had the majority of possession, and they kept us in our half. So when you're playing against South Africa, you've got to be able to match them around the breakdown. You've got to match them in an aerial game, and you've got to force us to play from deep. Don't start messing around anywhere near your own half. You've got to put us back. And then, there'll come a time when we'll run it back, because now with Damian Willemse or Fassi or Sasha at fullback, we've got people who can run it back and kick it back. But at least you have some control over the ball. And if you do lose the ball, you're losing it a long way from your try line. Now we weren't in the game for 20 minutes. I promise you, I wonder what the possession stats after 20 minutes was. It felt like 70% to Argentina. And that was why we just had to get through that period, and they scored a couple of tries through our stupidity. But we managed to hang in there for 24, 22, whatever it was, thanks to those two Sasha tries. And the problem then is, once we get on a roll, then so much confidence floods through this team. They are so confident. We scored some magical tries. There was some interpassing amongst the forwards, Brendan, that New Zealand would have been so proud of their teams in the past who could pass like that. Tight forwards out the back, popped over the top from Peter Steph to Toy. It was just brilliant rugby, and it's very, very hard to defend when we get on a roll like that. Really, it is difficult.
Gav?
Yeah, Brett. Yeah, you just we were sitting next to each other in the game, and you turned to me at some point and said, "What is this problem with Durban? Why are we always so poor in Durban?" And that shows how poor they were. Yeah, 29. It was a little bit later than.
Yeah, Gav, you got this thing about you come after,
and then
you come after every game now in this podcast, by the way.
Sorry?
And you pick the thing I say in the first 20 minutes, and then you come and say it on the podcast. You don't say what I say in the second half.
No, I'm not having a go.
No, you go, no, I'm not seeing a trend. Anyway, carry on.
Yeah, okay, I'll phrase it another way. For some reason, maybe because I'd sort of been so outspoken and predicting a big BOK win, I was incredibly tense during that first half hour in that game. In fact, right up to half time, I didn't go to, Brendan, I didn't have food with the rest of the people at half time. I sat in the press box. I don't know why. I mean, maybe it's my age or something, but I just honestly felt stressed. Yeah. So at halftime, I was actually quite stressed, and sort of you get into that stage of life, you worry you might have a heart attack or something. And I remember I was sitting there, and I honestly was stressed. It was just that, and it was almost like the BOKS were a bit like that in that first half as well. I mean, when you talk about conspiring against yourselves, and we've spoken about that in the last few weeks, is that the BOKS have conspired against themselves quite a bit. Obviously, at Eden Park being the prime example, and also in Joburg when they played too quickly and then overplayed at Ellis Park. But Cheslin, that try that he gave away, I can understand it, but that was a gift. I mean, that was Father Christmas giving a present to kids. And then of course what followed immediately was that penalty try. And at that stage you're sort of sitting there thinking to yourself, the BOKS could be in trouble here, because they once again being quite liberal with what they give away. But at the same time, in that last, when they sort of built up for that last try after the hooter, and I didn't understand it, because I couldn't understand why, because the stadium clock sort of showed 42 minutes, and I thought, what's going on here? Why are they still playing? That try to me was almost like the statement. It was almost like we're not going to mess around anymore. Like Sasha himself, as Nick said earlier, it was almost like he said, "I'm taking this game. I'm sick and tired of this. We must stop messing around. I'm gonna score tries," and he did. And then it was almost like the BOKS got that attitude that they were going to score that try before half time. And that was so I did feel a little bit easier during the halftime break, because I thought that the momentum had shifted. I knew Malcolm Marx was going to be off the field in the first 10 minutes of the second half, so that was a concern. But at the same time, it was just, I don't know, it just sort of felt like the BOKS were taking control in those last few minutes.
Just a couple of points there, Gavin, with stuff you said. I watched this morning. I watched the replay of that try of Sasha where he picked it up himself and he stopped Kane and Moody and he scored there. And the TV replay doesn't really show it, Nick. When we were obviously sitting at the stadium, you get a different view. But for Sasha to see that space was absolutely brilliant, because I didn't see that space. I actually, when he kicked that ball, I thought, oh, well, here we go, 50-22. And I think Matt Pierce also says that on the commentary.
Yeah.
And then as soon as you saw him motoring, you suddenly realized there's not an Argentinian around. And he saw that space brilliantly. Sorry, I just thought of that now. And then the other thing I wanted to say, Nick, maybe you can come in on this. We talk about how difficult it is for the opposition coaches. But now Malcolm Marx is off the field, and we send Wilco Low on, and then a 7-man scrum demolishes them and wins a penalty. I mean, for any opposition coach, you must think, geez, you've got a 1-man advantage against a BOK pack, and then they do that.
No, listen, I know we can, it's a wonderful thing. We're in a situation now where players like Sasha goes from fly off to fullback, Mani comes on. It is just it's just as good as when Sasha was fly off and Damien was at fullback. You had Vessel come on at hooker in one scrum, and then Juan Fenter, and then Vessels went to loose head, and Mark came back on. I mean, it's incredible. The machine keeps on going, and I think that is what is so laudable about this Springbok squad, is that they have bought into the fact that they have to be able to play, if they can, in more than one position to help the team out. And secondly, don't panic. If we're down to 14, it's not the end of the world. Or if we've lost Colby and Kwaga's on the wing, it's not the end of the world. We're still going to be able to fight. And Colby's played scrum off in the past, popped in there and played a bit of scrum off. We've had Grant Williams play on the wing. I could go on and on. Esther hasn't at the flank, so it hasn't stopped us from being, getting better and better. I think our worst games this season, quite frankly, were Italy or Georgia, the first game against Australia. We weren't so good, obviously, in Cape Town, and I think we missed an opportunity, to win in Eden Park. But that ththese last two games have been very, very, very good. And going into, you asked me a question about being coach. I mean, Philippe Contepone is he's a very good coach. But you can do nothing if you don't stop us on the gain line, if you don't stop us from getting momentum. The moment this BOK team gets momentum, we have so many options. And the options are not just passing. We pass with kick passes. The accuracy of our kick passes is so good. If we have a fly off, we see space like Sasha or Mani. Any opposition is in serious trouble when we get front foot ball. So I can't see France perhaps. I personally don't think Ireland are going to be able to match us at this level. And at the moment, New Zealand haven't got the players. Australia have improved, but this competition is ours to throw away now. The match at Twickenham next week is going to be played in front of 30 to 40,000 South Africans who are going to come flooding into that game. And I can't see how Argentina are going to pick themselves up, because they played quite well in that first half. And just, it was 24-22 and we were leading, having not played well. So it's going to be tough for them.
Yeah. I've got a funny, I mean, we'll probably talk about the Bledisloe Cup later, but I've got a funny feeling we might go into that game with it not being a decider anymore, because I've got a feeling that the Aussies might well win in Perth, but they're not going to get a bonus point, which will put them level with us, and our points differential is now way superior to everyone. So we could actually have a situation where we go into that game not actually needing anything, but obviously we'll chase maximum. But so yeah, I mean, that's all I was going to say on that. It was just like, obviously we'll look ahead at look back at the Bledisloe just now. But to me, you talk about having 1 foot in the door. The Springboks have like 1 foot and then just about most of the next leg through the door now. I just think that as Nick says, it's theirs to lose now.
Yeah. Look, I mean, go, Nick, go.
No, just Brendan, I just don't think we've got a team that goes there. They want to win this competition, but every game I think is a challenge to them. And I think what we've developed too is that the threat comes from within our group, not from outside our group. And I think that is so powerful. It was one of the things that New Zealand had going for them a while back, where the players who were starting test matches were more worried about the guy who was going to take their place than they were about the opponent they were playing that Saturday. So in our team, there's so many players who are dying to get into that team and play that almost there's no. I mean, you play a poor game, it's very, very hard to get yourself back in there. So I'm not sure what's going to happen this next weekend. I know that Rusty likes to, chop and change, but it looks like this backline can really do damage. And so I mean, Damien Dallin looks fine in that setup, but it's really moved on at 10. I mean, Pollard is a wet weather player now. I mean, I don't know whether you would go for him on a dry day ahead of Sasha or Mani at the moment. The way that they've performed in the best, and the way they've got the best out of our backline at the moment.
Sorry, I was going to say, Brendan, in an important game, Sash, if you're playing a final, the World Cup final, I see Andre as, I know some people don't like this word, but I want to see him as a finisher, because he could come in and kick that clutch kick. Although there's nothing wrong with Sash's kicking, actually. So that's, I'm almost arguing against myself now, because maybe you don't need that. By the time we get to the next World Cup, Sasha would have had a couple of clutch kicks and succeeded with them. And Mani's kicking has improved beyond doubt in the last couple of weeks as well. So maybe as Nick says, wet weather player, wet weather game. Although Sasha's, he's got the skills for a wet weather game too.
Yeah. True.
No, Gav, all I was going to say is, because interesting in terms of selection for this next coming week is Tony Brown and Russie both hinted this week that Mani would be starting at Twickenham. They'd make that change. So, but after that performance, obviously, it's just you've got so much momentum going for you now. I mean, it must be difficult to change anyway. But yeah, a guy like Andre is a real, I mean, he's basically done nothing wrong. It's just the backline has moved on, and I mean, he probably walk still into any other team in the world anyway. So it's going to be interesting to see what that selection is. I mean, at the moment, I suppose it doesn't really matter. I mean, Contepomi can't really plan for anything either. So whatever they do next week, it's gonna this is the standard. That's what they must do, and they're edging closer to an 80-minute game. And I'd still like to see what they do when they get to an 80-minute game. But I'm not sure we'll see it at Twickenham, but we'll probably see it pretty soon, hopefully.
Yeah. I think Pollard's got some work to do when he comes back and plays for the Bulls. I think you probably have Sasha running out for the Stormers. Mani's in Japan, so he has an opportunity to be front of to show what he can do in the URC and to prove that he's that he's still got rugby in him. He's not old, Pollard. He's 31, 32, isn't he? So there's lots of rugby left in him, and it's just the speed and the vision of those other two that's going to make it difficult for him when everyone else performs so well. When those two guys play fly half. And we haven't yet produced a performance with him at fly-off that equals that.
Yeah, to me, it's the whole gain line question. I mean, those other two guys do so much at the gain line, and they make split-second decisions. And funnily enough, like last night we were talking, there were people, Andy Colquhoun was in the press box, and we were saying, when last did we see a fly-half at international level score 3 tries? And I was racking my brains for a BOK, and funnily enough, Andre Pollard, in one of his very first tests as a 19-year-old against New Zealand at Ellis Park, he was absolutely outstanding. And in those days, he played on the gain line. I mean, remember the All Blacks the All Blacks were absolutely flabbergasted at this guy. And he was the future there. Well, he has. I mean, it's not like he's hadn't had a bad career. He's had a great career, but he hasn't sort of continued as that kind of player, if you know what I mean. He's almost changed. He's changed his mold of playing, the way that he plays. I mean, he isn't like the gain line player he was then. So, and I don't know whether it was Heineke in the 2015 World Cup that maybe coached it out of him, and that's where it started. But Andre, we mustn't forget that Andre, when he first started, was also a fantastic attacking player.
Yeah, true.
We were talking last night, and it's interesting to get your view on this, because one of the things I said to Gavin last night as well is that when we were talking about which other fly-offs were good. Obviously, Naas Botha is the first name that comes to mind, because he could do so much with the ball and he could control games. But most of the fly-offs that we've seen worldwide, Johnny Wilkins, Dan Carter's maybe the one exception, but most of them are type of are fly-halves in the traditional mold that could kick their points, put over a drop goal when it's necessary, and control the game. They weren't necessarily the attacking players that a player that Sasha is.
Great.
They weren't that type of guy. And we were trying to think, and Hugo Porter's name came up. That was another one that we thought.
Yeah, Hugo Porter. I was bringing up Hugo Porter.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And there's very little guys, and I think that's the thing with Andre is that he's continued to be a great fly-half, but he's continued to be a traditional 10 that controls the game. Whereas what we saw yesterday was a fly-half who does everything, and we haven't seen that for a long time.
Well, I remember watching. It was 2005 when the British Lions went over to play against New Zealand, and Dan Carter was very young. I think he was 22, 23. And he played a game where they won comfortably. I think it was the game where Tanu Umaga tipped up the centre. Driscoll, yeah. But in that game, Dan Carter kicked a drop, he kicked a conversion, he kicked a penalty, he scored 2 tries, he made tries for everyone. And it was I saw that performance and I said, that is the most complete performance I've ever seen from a fly-half. And I never, because his decision-making was just so good. He was quick enough to get through gaps. He didn't ever force gaps. They would open up because he was playing other players around him all the time. And this was the first time I've seen Sasha, really get it right. It wasn't that he didn't go for the gaps himself. He was looking for opportunities. He was so good that he was able to take them. But when there were opportunities for other people, and I cite the cross kick and I cite the space when he saw it for the long kick, and that could have been for the open side winger, or even the grubber that he put through and then kicked again himself. He's looking all the time for where there's space. And if you take those decisions and you get those decisions right, you put your team on the front foot all the time. And your ball carrying is so much easier for your forwards. Your ruck speed is so much better. The opposition are chasing back. The player who gets the ball is under pressure. I mean, it's just. I would say Hugo Porter, as you said, I was fortunate to play against him back in the day, and he was a magician as well. I think also the only person who's scored a try, a drop, a penalty, and a conversion against South Africa. I think when they beat us, back in 80. Yeah, exactly. So he was an attacking fly-half, and Dan Carter, and I think Sasha has the potential to be. And let's not forget Mani. Mani hasn't made too many mistakes this year when he's come on there, except for the game in Ellis Park.
Gav, before you come in, I just want to say one thing, I think it was you who told me last night. One of the other things about Sasha, which people out there might not know, is when they scored their penalty try, apparently it was, somebody said to us that it was Sasha that went to the ref and said, but there's 4 seconds left. And that's why they kicked off again, because we all thought the half was over. And I mean, just that sort of awareness of that just shows you also, like you say, he's always looking at things, and that's a small little thing, but it made a huge difference because they scored from there, and suddenly we weren't 7 points behind.
Yeah. No. He's got that. He really has. That's why I started off this whole podcast by saying what shone yesterday was his self-confidence, how comfortable he is already. He belongs there. And he's captained teams all the way through his life, and he's not shy of approaching a referee. He understands the laws. And I think what happened was that when the referee went to look and to check with the TMO about whether there was an infringement, there was still 4 seconds to go. And then when he found out that there had been an infringement, then by that time the clock had carried on ticking. But I think that he was reminded by Sasha that when he actually went to the TMO, there was still time on the 4 seconds or whatever it was still to go. And I just think that's quite incredible. I was sitting with 40, 50 people here, and the guys, at least 30 of them left, and I couldn't believe it. There was a kickoff again, and suddenly 3 minutes later, Sasha's going over to score a try. So that was a defining moment, not only showing his leadership, but also his determination to get back and get the points back on the board for South Africa. And it was excellent, outstanding.
Yeah.
What's the question, Brent?
I just thought you want to come in. I can carry on if you
want me to talk more about Sasha. Like, I just feel I sort of.
I was actually going to ask. Maybe I should ask both of you this question. It's something that, because obviously he's on everybody's lips. He's the mark man next week, whatever happens. Nick, as a coach, though, there's obviously a danger with that. And I know some people will say, but he was going to watch and his head doesn't become too big because everybody's going to shower praise on him now. How do you handle a player like that after a week like that? I'm sure you've seen a couple of them in your time.
You should watch an interview given by Dan Carter straight after that game in 2005, where he was interviewed by a New Zealand journalist, and they said, "We've never seen a player play a game like this. Absolutely incredible. You were able to see space better than anyone else. You passed the ball at the right time. You kicked at the right time. You kicked a drop. You kicked a penalty. You scored a try. It was the most wonderful individual performance." And Dan Carter actually looked a bit confused, and he said, "But I couldn't have done this without my teammates." He said, "The forwards, did you see the ball, the quality of ball I was getting from my pack? And did you see the passes I was getting from the passing was perfect. And outside me, I think it was Smith, outside him, who was actually telling him where the space was. So the communication from outside was coming to me. I mean, I just had to do what people were telling me, And he passed credit on. And the great thing in rugby is it's a team game above all, And so what I'm sure Sash is intelligent enough to know that no matter how much you put on a pedestal, always pass the credit on to the people around you. Pass the credit on to the forwards. Pass it on to the scrum half who gave you such good ball. Pass it on to Colby, who was in the perfect position for the cross kick, or the centre who calls for the grubber, or the blindside winger who's calling for the box kick. As soon as you spread praise, there's no problem. If you try and take the praise for yourself, then I'm afraid then there'll be issues in the team.
Gav,
do you have a view on that?
Yeah, well, Nick's coached it. I mean, I've never coached, so no, I don't have any comment. But just saying that, looking back, I mean, we have seen players come through that have become really big, and rugby has of all the sports. Rugby, I suppose, is the one sport that tries to sometimes chop them down just because it's the team sport. I mean, a cricketer, I mentioned Graham Pollock earlier. A guy like that. I mean, he can bat. The team's never sorry to see the guy bat all day, and nobody's going to say, "Jeepers, the guy hogged that innings." So it's different for rugby. I mean, it's you do need to be selfless. You do need to, and I know that that's something that they've been working on Sasha with Sasha. They have been trying to. I mean, there was a concern when he played for the Stormers, and look, I mean, the Stormers have a whole different sort of playing style. So I think that John Dobson wants him to bring the bling to the Stormers because that's the way they play. But when he had to make the transition to Springbok level, he needed to bring a bit more balance to his game, and I think that there was a lot of focus on that from Tony Brown and from Rassie. On Sasha and bringing that game management, bringing that balance, and we're seeing that now. I think it was almost like yesterday was a great situation for him because of what had happened, where we were sort of giving the game away, and then he thought, no, I've got nothing to lose now. Let's just go out and I'm going to go and win this game by myself. And we said it already, like it was almost like he had that determination to just take the game by the scruff. But I don't think there's problem. I mean, we've interviewed him. He's a very, very clever guy. And I know that Rassie considers him probably a future leader as well. He is. He's just one of those guys who's got game sense and everything. So, I did a feature on him for a rugby magazine, Kickoff magazine, a couple of months ago. And I spoke to quite a few backline coaches, and all of them said, "Listen, he'll figure it out himself. He's not. He doesn't need to be told that he's got to be. He's too individualistic. He'll know that. He'll figure everything out himself." And I think that's it in a nutshell.
The one thing that was interesting in last night's press conference that, and I know we were near the team, I mean, Nick, you probably know it as well, but it was interesting that Sia mentioned it last night. He brought up the fact that when things were going wrong on the field, their system in the team is not just that the team leaders, because we all know the stories about leadership groups and senior players who talk up in those moments. But Sia said they've made a point in this group of if the guy's got one cap and he's got something to add, his voice must be heard. And he said last night, that was one of the things. The younger guys put up their voices in those moments. And he didn't mention Sasha, but I take it that's one of the guys he was obviously referring to. And I'm sure Sasha did say something. It's that type of thing that's quite interesting about this team. And it's something different that we don't see in all teams around the world as well.
Yeah, there's certain positions that you have to be a decision maker. You've got to be at a hooker runs that runs the front row, runs the scrums. A line-out caller, he's in charge of line-outs. There's someone who's in your key defensive guy around the scrum. You've got a maul specialist. Your scrum half decides box kicking when he passes and together with the fly off. And then you need a back three guy, and the outside center is in charge of defense, when to close, when we're outnumbered, what to do. The communications is so important from that position. So there isn't any position on the field really where you can't give good information if you do talk. And I didn't know that. I did see Sasha talking in one, close little huddles. So they have obviously given them, the right to do that if they've got something that can help the rest of the team. I just wanted to add, though, that we've had a long time talking about Sasha, a long time talking about Pollard and Mani. But understand that without our pack of forwards, if our pack of forwards do not win good front football with momentum, you can put whatever fly if you want there, he's not going to win us the game. You need your pack to provide you with good front football. And the game in particular, when our ball is slow, it makes it so much harder for us to come off and our fly off. So we've got to give a lot of kudos to our pack for the performances in New Zealand, in Wellington, and yesterday when we got that 50 minutes on the front foot. They are really good when they get going. So all credit to Sasha for an unbelievable game, but let's acknowledge how well our forwards played and how well they got on top of the Argentinians in that period of supremacy.
Yeah. Gav, do you want something to add? We should go to the
Funnily enough, when one guy I noticed talking quite a bit later in the game was Morne van den Berg when he came on. One of the most junior players. Obviously, I mean, scrum half's an important guy, but I mean, there was towards the end there was quite a lot of talking. I haven't got much.
Scrum was a quite those, aren't they?
Kevin Putt.
Yeah, go on. Sorry.
I haven't got much more to add from there. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's talk the cup. Nick, I know you were predisposed, so you didn't see the whole game. So Gavin and I did watch it together, and the one thing we felt both is this wasn't. New Zealand were very good in the first 20 minutes, but Australia were extremely passive in their defense. Pretty much like we've seen them before in that Lions test, the same sort of thing, very passive. And then they came back into the game. And then the referee, you can say it's bad discipline, but then the referee gave, I think, 8 penalties almost in a row against them. And some really interesting decisions. I think if you're Australian this morning, you're probably cursing the referee because it was some really bizarre ones, including one that led to a yellow card for, I think, Harry Potter. And that changed the game. And we never saw the replay of that. There was a very good TV producer from Sky Sports who hid that replay. I'm obviously joking. Maybe there was nothing. Maybe it was a perfect. The referee got it right. But certainly the All Blacks they didn't give that amazing performance, Gav, that everyone talked about the backlash and how they're going to come back, etc. And certainly they were. If they didn't get that yellow card, they were quite lucky to win that game.
I saw that game as similar as a good follow-up from the last Eden Park test, where South Africa conspired against themselves. I think in the end, Australia will regret being so passive on defence in that first half. I mean, they just. I mean, it was almost like maybe they were against South Africa at Ellis Park as well. Let South Africa take advantage. Then it's even worse than this All Black team. But and then there was that discipline in the third quarter. They really lost. I know you're talking about the later yellow card, but I think where they lost the game was in the third quarter. That's where the momentum swung. I remember there were like a couple of double penalties. In fact, there was 8 penalties in a row to the All Blacks, and that was just a complete momentum killer as far as, because the Aussies were coming back into the game well. Then they were when they went to half time. I think it was 3 points behind. I felt that Australia had the momentum. Then they were starting to win the possession. They were starting to get go forward ball, and then it just changed because they could no longer get territory because of the penalties, and it was the All Blacks. But the All Blacks, this All Black team just doesn't impress me. I just don't think that they're on the same level as some of the All Black teams of the past. So it's a difficult one, but it was a good. I think that was a good result for. I mean, I was sitting there wanting Australia to win, But it was probably in the end the best result for South Africa, because now it's completely in South Africa's hands. Whereas if Australia had won that game, then there would be the possibility that they'd have to chase something chase a win, or a bonus point win even in London.
Yeah, we're not going to.
I'm very surprised.
Go, Nick.
Very surprised that. Sorry, but I'm very surprised that Gavin says that he was hoping that Australia would win, because I mean, there's that Eden Park thing. I don't want them to be the one that break the record. I want South Africa to be the one that breaks the record. And also they would have, if they win that game, then it makes it harder for us to win the competition. So I've also thought that they would. When I said I thought it was going to be 1-1 against the two of them. So I think Australia have a good chance in Perth. And I think it was quite interesting afterwards, because Joe Schmidt doesn't usually come out against the referees. But he said the refereeing at the moment is making it very difficult for him to coach. He's he's coaching his team to do one thing, which is allowed by one sort of group of referees. And then either, it's maybe the Southern Hemisphere group, but then you get a Northern Hemisphere guy who was an Italian, who did this test. And suddenly, everything that you were allowed to do against South Africa, you're not allowed to do anymore because it's not a Southern Hemisphere referee. So I think that needs to be cleaned up. You don't want there be a situation where a coach as calm and process driven as a guy like Joe Schmidt should start talking about the referee after the game.
Yeah. Just to clarify, when I said I wanted Australia to win, that sort of changed during the game. I mean, I do have a bit of an ego, and I had sort of said beforehand to anybody who wanted to listen that I thought the All Blacks were going to possibly. Okay, this was before Wellington, where South Africa won. Then I didn't really know, but I did say to somebody or to on another platform early on in the competition that I thought that there was going to be a big blowout for the Aussies, and that they were going to lose quite handsomely at Eden Park. So that's why I said that ego thing. Like, there was at the start of the game, I wanted the All Blacks to win comfortably so that I could be right. Yes, but then during the game, it just felt like I sort of feel sorry for Australia because of what was happening with their referee, and they were playing well. So then I started, and also, like, to be honest, I've got this, like, that macabre sort of thing of, like, watching seeing people say an accident or something. I mean, I just would love to have seen how New Zealand were going to then react if they'd lost another game. I mean,
another loss.
So that was the thing. So during the game, because I thought that the All Blacks weren't particularly good in that game, I was sort of thinking these guys are in trouble. There was one stage I thought these guys are really in trouble, and then obviously my mind started to go to, like, what is their media going to say tomorrow? What excuse is there this time if they'd lost again? So it's like, it's not often you see New Zealand lose consecutive. I mean, Nick, when you won the Tri Nations in 1998, if I remember correctly, I don't think they won a test. But that was one of the rare occasions where they sort of lost lots of consecutive tests. So if that had happened, it would have been a disaster. I mean, it was a disaster in '98 for them.
Exactly. John Hart was under huge pressure, but they had Rod McQueen was doing a great job with Australia, and we had a great team. So, having been lauded in New Zealand for having come over in '96, when was it? In 96, that's right. And I think the All Blacks won the series 3-1. Was it in
96?
Yeah, 96. Yeah.
And then he was the next best thing that they've seen as a coach. And then suddenly you lose to Australia, lose to South Africa, both home and away. Then it's not a good thing. And Robertson, he doesn't want to get into that situation. We are passionate here, and can we vilify coaches if they don't succeed? But jeepers, it's a small country, New Zealand, and that's all they talk about. So
just one last point from me on that. Ardie Severe, of course, in that process, we must the momentum swinging penalty was probably a turnover by Ardie, which, like he did against us at Eden Park, same sort of penalty as well. And I made the comment yesterday to somebody as well in New Zealand, saying that you take Ardie out of that pack, and that there's not many teeth left in that pack if you take Ardie, because he's almost the heart and soul of that pack, and he inspires the rest of them. But I must admit, I'm like Gavin. I was actually hoping Australia would win as well, but just because we've seen the All Blacks on the other side, and we've seen when they're on top, and we've also had the chirps, and we've had all the phone calls and messages and the memes and all that stuff. So Yeah, sometimes it's good to see it on the other foot. But I'm done for today. I don't know if you guys have any parting words before we go. We'll chat before Twickenham.
I've got to hit the road, Simon.
No. Yeah, good. Thanks. Lovely chatting to you guys.
Great. We'll be back before
Thanks.
the Twickenham game as well. But yeah, thanks. If you haven't already, smash the subscribe button. Leave your comments below. We read them all. And yeah, we'll see you guys at the next episode. Cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers.